Welcome to Articulate This. In today's episode, we dive into the world of change with a master strategist, Jim Cruickshank. Jim unravels the complexities of change management, sharing his journey and the evolution of frameworks that are reshaping organizations worldwide. Discover the secrets behind effective stakeholder engagement and how digital transformation is not just a trend, but a necessity in today's fast-paced business landscape. Jim brings to light the fine line between good and great strategies and the metrics that truly measure success in the realm of change. Join us for this transformative journey packed with insights from Jim's extensive experience, personal passions, and the art of mastering change. This is not just a conversation, it's a gateway to revolutionizing your organization. Let's get into it. For those that may not be familiar with your background, can you give us a brief overview of your journey in change management?
Absolutely. I've really been working on the people side of change as a advisor and executive for almost 20 years. Applied change management principles and practices across multiple industries, segments, sectors, companies of all shapes and sizes, but fundamentally focused on what it really is to make people successful, incorporating a change into their daily lives, whether their work lives or even home lives.
What drew you to this field of organizational change management and how did you get started?
I think I've always been intrigued by the way people take different approaches to incorporating changes into their lives. Some people do things collectively. Some people are really individual, and I've always found that sort of different dynamic has been interesting in trying to figure people out, put that sort of unique puzzle together. I really started to get into change management early as a junior consultant after learning really how to do strategy and start implementing strategy with clients. And you always run into those challenges of what do our people need to do differently to make the strategy work or to make an org design work. And so I started to get into those different things about how you engage people in change, how you communicate with people, how people have to be trained, and how you bring all of those things together into into a coherent program, again, that's focused on that individual, make them successful doing something new.
Let's take a closer, let's take more of a closer look at frameworks in general. So, how would you describe the evolution of change management frameworks over the years? Are there any that have influenced your approach?
There are all kinds of frameworks out there, Pat, when it comes to change management. Some are much more well known than others. I think the most well known one out there is ProSci. It's used around the world, but all of them really apply just this structured approach and back to understanding the impact of a change on a person or a group of people, trying to document a process to take that individual or that group from where they are today through some process of change to an endpoint. Some of the frameworks are more heavy on documentation than others. I would say some teach you how to document change and not necessarily manage it. But I think what you have to do over time, and I think how they've evolved over the years, is they've really just flexed to the complexity that we have today. There's so much different in terms of where people get information and who they communicate with, how they communicate, the needs of successfully navigating a hybrid work world, for example. But all of them still fundamentally come back to this understanding of what is it that's changing? Do we understand the impact of what that change is in as much detail as we can? For example, is it a nature of work? Is it time that tasks have to be executed? Is it who people are working with or how they're working? All of those things. And also I think taking into consideration there's more parallel activities in the world we live in today than there ever used to be with agile approaches to things, and you really just need to keep in focus what change management's all about, and it's that making people successful doing something new, figuring out what that is, putting that unique puzzle together, and I think the puzzles become more complex over time.
So I'm a big fan of frameworks in general because, like you mentioned at the beginning there, it gives you sort of that structure, that foundation. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You kind of answered this in what you just said, but what does make a change management framework effective?
What makes it really effective is it's rooted in people. It's not Change management is not an exercise in documentation. A framework that's effective gives you the right level of inquiry into a person or a group of people to understand the dynamic of a change in their world. And so I really think when you're focused on understanding the impacts of a change at a personal level, that's how a framework is really successful and gives you sort of a roadmap forward to making that change work.
You kind of mentioned that ProSci is I would say the most well known one and probably the most one that's adopted across organizations. But do you find that there's any sort of competing or complementary frameworks that assist in change management? And if they are, like, how would you reconcile them?
Well, I think there's, first of all, almost any organization that you talk to, big four consulting firms, major corporations, governments, many of them have taken a framework like ProSci and personalized it to their needs. So there are all kinds of them out there that have sort of uh, slightly different elements to them, just depending on the characteristic. I think the one though that I would say is really more of a project management framework, and so over what I've really seen over the years is much more of this necessity to integrate a change management plan or approach into the actual line items and discipline of a project management framework so that the two are actually together, right? Change management, somewhat as it's sort of grown in acceptance over the years, started off from being a piece that was separate and included in the bottom lines of a project plan that you either did or you didn't do, and often you didn't do until something really went wrong or some change wasn't really being effective. And so I've really pushed over the years of that need for integration. It just becomes fundamental to how projects that drive organizational change just incorporate this people side of wanting to make change work. It's not a separate program, it's something that project managers need to understand, change managers need to understand. So, all of that project management discipline and those change management frameworks and plans really become one as an integrated piece and approach to change.
So now let's talk about actually the implementation across the organization. Can you sometimes, change can sometimes be met with resistance. How do you typically approach change management in different departments or teams, and where did and and where the priorities might differ? Like, how do you manage that?
Sure. Well, it sounds cliche, but every change really is unique, and every team tends to approach it differently because people just have different histories and they bring different experiences to bear anytime they're being asked to do something change related. And so you really need to take the time at the outset to really well understand, well, what is it that's actually changing? Who is it changing for? Is it a change that's major? Is it relatively minor? And I say that, and that's why I say that's unique, is sometimes the smallest of changes from one person's point of view can be a huge change from someone else's. And you really just need to understand that those unique people, those unique groups, before you decide on, well, what's your plan to actually overcome any type of resistance that you mentioned that pops up, or any other kind of challenge along the way. And you did mention resistance, and I think the key to managing that resistance is understanding that no matter the size of the change or the group, someone is not going to like it. People fundamentally don't like change. So people, there will always be resistance to change. The key, I think, to the success is how you manage it. And if you think about projects along a bell curve, almost any type of change, there's always groups at the end. There's resistors at one end, and there's real champions at the other. But the majority of people are in the middle. And as a manager, you people just generally, you don't like people being unhappy, right? It's just human nature. You're going to try to overcome resistance. You're going to try to understand the nature of it. You're going to spend all of this energy on trying to bring resistors on side. And the risk that you run as a change manager is you ignore everybody else. And so those people that were the vast majority that are in the middle of any change process, I refer to them as fence sitters, right? Well, if you ignore them, then when you have an absence of information, the brain tends to fill in things that are pretty negative. And so people will tend to shift more towards resistance. So it's really a matter of balance, finding where the resistance is, but really managing the amount of time and effort so that you don't overmanage.
From your experience, how does digital transformation play into the change management process?
Sure. Well, digital transformation, it is. I mean, but by nature, it's fundamentally changing the way that people work, the way that we as an organization store and interact with and work with data that we are stewards of. And in many cases, it's it's changing the way, the fundamental process that we work with data, and the way that we work across silos. We're able to work faster. We're able to model differently. We're able to ensure that we have more uptime for our customers. And so you can really see you spend time in different places. So digital transformation is really trying to understand, well, how have our jobs changed in a cloud-based environment versus what we maybe used to have in a mainframe-based environment. We have different skill needs. We have uh, uh, different structure needs, and so it really is a pretty complex process from start to finish.
Could you shed some light on the role of stakeholder engagement and successful change management?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes back to some of the things that I've said first. First, stakeholders are more likely to buy into a change process that they've had a stake in shaping. And so again, really understanding, well, what's the change that's happening, and can you get the people that are most impacted in helping you to really design what the change solution is. It's that phrase of having, you know uh, being part of a change as opposed to having change done to you. It's being done with you. And so you are trying to really ensure that people have buy-in to a future state solution, that an implementation plan makes sense given, let's say, unique characteristics of stakeholder groups. So it's really, really crucial to understanding stakeholders and understanding that their perspectives of change also may change over time. Right? They, as they learn more about a given change, as they become more involved in it, it's that they'll move across a process of really of accepting where a change impacts them, just as they learn more about it, as they become more attached to it and more involved in it.
I love how you said, having change, doing change with them instead of to them. That's a good visual. That's a really important aspect of how you get proper buy-in. Because once people believe they're a part of the change, I guess you get a lot. The cooperation is better. There's a more positive outlook in the overall feeling of the change itself.
Absolutely.
Um, let's talk about, we kind of hinted around this, but challenges and benefits of change management. So, like, what are some of the most significant challenges you faced in implementing change, and how did you overcome them?
Sure. Well, I think some of the most one of the most significant challenges in any change process really is time. And it's I say this all the time, that time is the most precious resource and the one that limits really most that we do. We expect in the world that we live in today that change is instantaneous, that it will be adopted quickly. And I actually think these days change is far more complex in many aspects than it used to be. It's one of those areas where technology and knowledge hasn't made things easier. In many cases, it makes them harder, just more complex. And so I think really in trying to understand that there's only so much pace that an individual can operate at in order to really put it to embed a change or adopt a change. And you really need to keep that focus on, are we giving people enough time to absorb what they're being asked to absorb? Because often it's not one change that happens. And when you talk about a large process of digital transformation, one individual or one group of individuals could be being impacted by six, seven, or more specific changes at any one time. And so it really is a matter of staging so that people have an ability or a time to embrace, to understand, to adjust, and to adopt what they're being asked to do. And so it's often that pushback to often the original plans in a lot of corporate settings that want change to happen today, if not yesterday. And we have to adjust that lens to say, if we really want the outcomes, they do take some time for people to adjust. We have to have the right sense of what's achievable over what time frame, and be able to measure success. That if you don't have 100% adoption of something within a really, really short period of time, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a failure. It just means it's taking a little bit longer. And most of the time,
Yeah.
my experience is it's because of the number of changes any one individual or group are being exposed to at that any given time. It's not just one change usually.
I think with emerging technologies, you have cloud, more connectivity, more configurability. I think in the past, when things, even from a technology standpoint, when you built something, you didn't necessarily have to worry about what the other side was doing or another part of the system was doing. It was very focused on what you did, and it could have been custom without really any impact on, let's say, the greater good or the area that you worked in. As we drive towards this more connectivity, this more configurability, having it clear where change has to happen, and what you do does impact someone downstream. I think that's where change, when we talk about change management now, learning and understanding that, I think that's where resistance or lack of understanding or things along those lines, I think that's where maybe it's still chartering in the unknown.
Yeah, I think Pat, I think you're right, and I think where you see that sort of in a number of organizations are that organizations sometimes struggle to work collaboratively. They still work in silos, and it is that you can make a change in one area, and as you're a leader in that area, you might understand the impacts of that change to you and your team, but maybe not necessarily the group that's next door or the group that's down the hall or across the country or somewhere else. And it's really sort of taking that time to try to understand what are all of the impacts of this change that we are making beyond the initial sort of four walls immediately around me or my team or my area. Do we understand how far reaching something is and how complex something is? Because it's not just our team's people that we're trying to make successful. We're trying to make an organization successful and adopt what changes we're putting in place. So you fundamentally have to understand what the impacts as broadly are, and it's really what I see. It's really taking that time and that care to fully understand the scope of what you're putting in place, understanding full well that you won't necessarily have all the answers at the beginning, or you won't necessarily know all the impacts. But it doesn't mean you don't put that effort in to try to be as best as you can be and know as much as you can as early as you can.
Yeah, I think you hit on some really good points there, and I would say I'll add to that sometimes one group is further ahead than the other group, and you're asking the group that's further ahead to either slow down or take something away that they've done in order for the rest of the company, the rest of the areas to catch up. So navigating that and understanding what you're doing for the greater good is sometimes those difficult conversations.
Oh, for sure, right?
So
And
let's
and really giving sometimes those people that are further ahead of the of sort of that change curve can really take on a role of coach and champion that they might not realize at the outset, that by nature of where they are in that process they can really be seen as an expert, and it's more seen as bringing everyone else along as opposed to slowing you down.
let's talk a little bit about good versus great in change management. In your perspective, what separates a good change management strategy from a great one?
Well, I think what makes a good change management strategy different from a great one is the but is really measured by both productivity loss or gain and time, right? The purpose of any change management plan really is to decrease any productivity loss when a change is introduced, and to achieve your productivity gain, the output that you are looking for, in as short a period of time as you can. And so I think what separates out good from great is measured along both of those scales. How big of a productivity drop did you experience? And how long did it last until you could get back to even or back to the outcome that you really wanted from the change? And often that's driven by resourcing, planning, timeline, the amount of effort that you put into understanding stakeholders, the amount of resources you have to be able to structure training and other communications and engagement approaches. And so I think those are the ways to measure what's good versus what's great. But at the end of the day, are you still getting to people being successful doing something new?
So you kind of hinted on a question that I was going to go into more about, the metrics and the indicators you typically use to measure the success of a change initiative. So can you expand a little bit more on that?
Sure. And really, when you're looking at whether your outcome is based in productivity, cycle time, speed, uh, you can look at it as revenue growth, contract retention, right? Again, it comes back to really at the start of saying, well, what's success going to look like and have we defined it? I find in a lot of large transformation projects that it's often that question that people lose sight of over the course of a change. So it becomes this challenge to say, well, how are we actually doing? Right? Are we getting the benefit of the change that we wanted? Is change management actually having an impact on that success? Again, often people will just get their head down and keep working on something and forget why they were actually putting a change in place. And when you talk about turnover and the amount of churn in a lot of organizations, that's not uncommon. So it really is kind of ensuring we continually remind ourselves and leaders what were the outcomes that we wanted. Because I still find, at the end of a lot of projects, they'll say, well, we're done. We've got our change in place now. And you say, okay, well, what's success 6 months from now? What does it look like? And people can sometimes struggle to answer that question. So it's hard to focus back specifically on was change management actually successful, right? You have to almost reset the metrics sometimes.
So you actually led perfectly into my next question, which was going to be like, how do you ensure that the changes implemented are sustainable in the long run?
Right. Well, it's I think sustainability. One of the big keys there is creating ownership of the change inside the business. And I look at my role as a change management professional as more of a change enablement professional. The business manages the change at the end of the day. When you get part of the business through adopting, say, a change in platform from a mainframe platform to, say, a cloud-based platform that we're seeing quite common across businesses these days, right? Someone in the business has to be responsible at the end of that to continue to look back over time to measure, are we getting the benefits? Has anything evolved? Do we need to do more training? Did we make any other incremental adjustments? Right? We're the people closest to the business need to watch over that and need to keep the ownership of it. They can't go back to sort of the change management practice and say, hey, come and help us out a year from now and see how we're doing. And so it really is making sure that you're fostering the ownership of a change outcome in the business, that they become the stewards of that change and watching over it. And if they see change continuing, to maybe struggle or adoption or shift slightly, then we can, as change management professionals, we can help them in a different way. But it's creating ownership of the change in the business is, in my in in my opinion, the key thing to making change sustainable.
Can you provide any sort of examples from your past experience at other companies or firms where your approach made a distinct difference in the outcome?
Sure. I think some of the biggest changes is really we've had organizations working through, again, digital transformation and underestimating the amount of resources required to build and conduct fundamental training of a new way of working, both from a build of materials and a time to to actually deliver training, absorb training, and get into business. I think where you find the most success is getting organizations to adjust the resourcing level. Something like training and communications are things that aren't necessarily visible, so they're sometimes easy to overlook in project and initiative budgeting. And you can say, if you want this change to happen in a particular period of time, it has to be resourced appropriately from training, communication, and engagement. Otherwise, you're going to struggle. And I think we've brought that where we're brought in early enough into initiative plans that you can really have that benefit. Saying, do not overlook those soft or those things that may fly a bit under the radar, that people fundamentally need to be successful. They need an ability to do something new or something different. They have to be trained on it. They have to have some time taken. It has to be delivered in a way that they as an adult understand, and to resource and think about that the right way, and to make sure that organizations appreciate that. That's where we've really, I think, had some of the biggest impact on success to change.
Amazing. So let's get to know Jim a little bit better. So outside of your professional life, what are some of your passions or hobbies?
Well, so I am a golf fanatic. I will golf just about anywhere in any weather in any country. It is definitely one of my passions. I've had the good fortune to be able to do that and play around the world, and just the number of people that I get a chance to meet and places that I get to see, and I bring my my family's developed kind of that same passion. So we also do that together. And I'm also a musician. I've played keyboard my pretty much my entire life from the time I was 6 to now into my early 50s. And so it's one of the ways that I'll relax as well. And but those are the two big passions in my life outside of family.
Where's your favorite course that you ever played?
I'd have to say I'd have to say the National Club in Myrtle Beach in South Carolina is it's just it's scenic, it's well known, it's fun, and it's a place I get to return to fairly frequently.
What's the latest or earliest you've played in Canada of
Uh,
the season?
the I think the latest that I've played in a calendar year is in the middle of December, and the earliest that I've played is early February. Of course, these days, who knows what the weather's going to be like now? We could have 20 degrees in December or January, or who knows? It's whenever you get a little bit of warmth.
Are there any books, podcasts, or other resources that have been particularly influential in your personal professional development?
I think Good to Great has really been one that has had a lot of impact on me. It has a lot of uh, lean and understanding the people side that you need to have put conscious effort into driving success. And then I'd also say a book called The Innovator's Dilemma is one that's always thought provoking, and again gives you some unique frameworks to think about innovation and how you bring people along through that process.
Are there any personal routines or practices you swear by?
For me, I believe that I need to separate myself from a lot of the complexities of the day to day. So I do spend a fair bit of time on my own and one-on-one reflection and meditation in order just to really clear my mind of a lot of clutter, to be able to find my own center and focus so that I can bring the best energy that I can to my personal and professional pursuits every day, and taking that time to just take care of myself, so that I can be at my best for everybody else.
It's amazing. So, looking back at your career, is there any particular mentor or experience that profoundly shaped your approach or philosophy?
Yes, I mean, I very very early in my consulting career, I had the opportunity to work for a very senior partner who had been in consulting a number of years, had a track record of his own personal success as an organizational CEO, an entrepreneur, and but his I would say he really taught me how to think about the complexities of involving people and things, that you can't just take a a given solution or a best practice or a leading practice over somewhere and just drop it in and expect that it's going to work. You have to understand the people that you're touching in order to be able to construct the right solution for them. And I think as a young consultant who was really looking for guidelines or templates or things to be able to take from client to client or group to group to say, it's not a cookie cutter world. When you're dealing with people, you need to understand the intricacies of them, the uniqueness of them, and build something that works in all of those situations. And still to this day, I think about questions every time that he taught me about, do I know enough about this person? Is this solution actually the right one? And to this day, I still have those questions written on a post-it note on the side of my desk. I look at them all the time.
It's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Jim, for joining me this week. For people who want to get in contact with you, where's the best place for them to connect with you?
The best place for them to connect with me is via LinkedIn. My profile's up there. I monitor the messaging all of the time. Happy to continue to grow my network and learn from other people and share my experiences and understandings out of the field of change and other things with a broader network. So that's the best place to find me.
Amazing. Well, thanks again for joining. And remember, stay curious and keep learning. Take care, everyone.